welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. I'll be your astrologer today. Thank you guys for joining me. And happy Sunday for those of you guys who are watching on Sunday. This is going to be the astro weather for the week of November 24th through December 1st, 2024. This is obviously the astro weather, so we're going to take a look at the transits for the week ahead. But we are really going to be focusing today on Mercury going retrograde in Sagittarius. That is the big headline for the transit this week. We got a lot of stuff going on. So if you guys like my content and you want to see more of it, please click the like button below. Give me a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you're alerted as to when I have new videos coming out. I'm here every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. We do a little bit of Western astrology, tarot, as well as the Sabian symbols, trying to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Leave me your comments below. Let me know, where is Mercury retrograding in your chart, and how are you feeling with the energies so far? All right, so themes for this week. Well, we've got a lot of stuff happening. All right, so something that you guys want to think about is that there will be quite a few mutable squares and oppositions this week. So if you happen to be a Gemini, a Virgo, a Sagittarius, or a Pisces, Sun, Moon, Rising, you guys are really feeling the effects of some of these mutable squares. Actually, I think we are all going to feel them. I keep referring to it as like the madness of like these mutable squares. And essentially when we have squares, there's pressure, there's stuff kind of going on from outside of ourselves that is encouraging us to change. Mutable signs, I will give them credit, right? They're flexible. They know how to stay open-minded, and they are kind of open to change. So be mindful of changes this week, not only because of the mutable squares, but also because of Mercury retrograde. There is likely going to be lots of changes when it comes to travel, learning, ideas, but most importantly, what you believe in as Mercury is turning retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius. Now, this is just kind of general overall theme, right? This, Mercury retrograde in Sag, reworking, rethinking something revolving around our beliefs, maybe even our culture, where we come from, what we've learned in the past. We're seeing some aspects to Jupiter, which obviously is going to kind of bring up also our philosophies, how we communicate with one another, stuff involving like, court law, that kind of stuff. And we will also see some squares to Saturn taking place throughout this Mercury retrograde. So really, this is about moving past cultural or religious or identity divides. That is really going to be, I think, the important lesson, and we're kind of getting it all week. So I would just advise some of you guys, when in doubt, if you're feeling a little stuck or confused, check in with someone wiser. Check in with somebody who's experienced. This could be a trusted mentor, an elder, or a guide. Literally, Sagittarius represents these kinds of archetypes. And, do not let Mercury's mishaps and moments of misunderstanding get in the way of making progress. I think that's also what's really, really, really important this week. Some of you guys are going to feel like you're speaking a foreign language and you're like, why is this person not understanding me or not getting what I'm trying to say? We can get really flustered with not being able to feel like we're getting our point across, or that people don't understand where we're coming from, while others will have quite literal translation issues because, Mercury is about communication and business, and it can be about language, and it's in the sign of Sagittarius, which can be about foreigners, and it's in opposition with this mutual reception that we have to Jupiter and Gemini, which, they're both kind of saying the same thing. They're trying to get the same point across, but they're not speaking the same language. So we can see quite literal translation issues, but interesting to watch both of these still technically in a square to Saturn and Pisces. And this is really teaching us that it's up to us to be patient, to be kind, to bridge the gaps in cultural and kind of spiritual divide. And I think that, we're likely to learn in this period that we have a lot more in common than we do, that's different. I think we can be really focusing on, turning misconceptions into opportunities to kind of better understand one another, even if we're coming from two different perspectives. Some of you guys are also going to feel with some of these oppositions to Jupiter and Mercury retrograde in a Jupiter sign that we are having a real test of faith. Okay, this is real this week. You guys have heard me talk about how, Jupiter and Gemini square Saturn is like unanswered prayers, and it kind of ends up being like the biggest blessing ever, but it's hard to kind of see it when, you're not quite through it yet. So everything is going to be about perspective this week. I feel like if you're having a bit of a test of faith, Mercury retrograde is like, well, do I go back to, reading some of my spiritual books? Do I go back to church? Do I go back to praying and meditating? It can be a time where having your favorite self-help book on hand can be really helpful. Maybe you will listen to an audiobook, or, you'll go back to a book that you haven't, finished, or maybe that you kind of need a refresher on, especially while you're walking or you're driving or you're in transit. Okay, so if you know that you're going to have a long commute, if you know that you're going to have a road trip, make sure you have something really juicy that you can kind of mentally kind of sink your teeth into. Even if it's you going back to something that you've read before, it can be really refreshing to kind of have some of those teachings kind of come back for you at this time. It can be really helpful during the retrograde. Also consider checking out creators to gain perspective. Mercury retrograde can be a time where we're going deeper and we're more internal. So if you're wanting to learn more, right, about faith, philosophy, belief, you can go and find somebody new, find a new teacher. This opposition to Jupiter and Gemini is great for audiobooks. It's great for finding new YouTubers, new people who are kind of content creators, bloggers, right, writers, all of that stuff. And obviously the squares to Saturn can be about, empathy, emotions, empathicness, like learning how to better kind of develop our emotions, be more considerate to other people, be more self-aware, be more patient, be more kind. And also it's like really great for tapping into learning more about mysticism, spirituality, as well as meditation, right? Saturn in Pisces is like so epic for really developing a great meditation practice. So essentially, we're going to see Mercury turn retrograde, and, pay attention, like I said, to those of you guys who are ruled by Mercury. So it's in Sagittarius, so Sagittarius, sun, moon, and risings. You guys will feel this, but the retrograde really impacts my Gemini and my Virgos because you guys are ruled by Mercury. So you guys are going to feel it. Pisces, you too, because it's impacting the mutable signs. And if you happen to have any placements in Sagittarius, that's like 23 to about 6 degrees or so, you are in the direct line of fire of the Mercury retrograde. Now, we have Mercury retrograde about 3 times a year, right? The last one we had was kind of like July going into August, and Leo, they're primarily in fire signs this year. So we are going to be having yet another one. This is, a time where when Mercury turns retrograde, it's inviting us to take a step back. And in Sagittarius, we sometimes kind of get lost in the bigger picture, right? We get so excited about where we're going in the trip and everything's going to be great that, we hop in the car, we're kind of blissed out, we forgot our map, we don't have our phone, we're trying to wing it, that kind of stuff happens when we see Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. And so I feel like this is a time for us to really go back and find the inner meaning. It's time to kind of collect all of the details. Remember, retro, right? Return, review, reassess, remember, rework. These are the things that we want to do during a Mercury retrograde. And if you guys have heard me talk about it before, I'm not somebody who's, I'm not somebody who looks at a Mercury retrograde like, oh, it's the end of the world, like the sky is falling down. Mercury retrograde's like, cleaning out the fridge, right? We have to do it like every couple of months, otherwise something's in there and something stinks. So we have to kind of clear out all the condiments, wipe everything down, reorganize stuff, kind of take stock in what we have and what we don't have and what we need. And then everything's a little bit more so fully functional, right? So we want to actually work with retrograde periods. They can be really helpful. And Mercury happens to retrograde, probably, I think, the most often than some of the other planets in terms of frequency, maybe not necessarily length, because Mercury's retrograde for about 3 weeks, but we see it happen more often than the other planets. Anyway, so the good news is that, throughout this Mercury retrograde pre-shadow, we have had a lot of hurdles that we have already been through, right? We've already experienced the turbulence. So we know what needs to be worked out. And if you guys know anything about retrogrades, we know that retrogrades are a process. We see the pre-shadow where a planet moves through the degrees, which it's going to activate, and we're going to start seeing stuff kind of break down, or we see like that storm revolving around the planetary theme. Then, the planet turns retrograde, so we go back over it, we integrate, we fix it, we kind of find the missing parts and pieces, we put it back together, the planet goes direct, and then we move forward, and then we will see the post-shadow, right? Sounds really linear. It's not. And this one is definitely not by any means, even though technically, I guess, a planet going retrograde by degrees seems linear, but this one's like all over the map. And, not surprised considering that it's in Sagittarius. So for this one, you want to look at your natal chart. You want to see, well, what house is Sagittarius? Okay, so pull out your chart, look at it, whether you have it on your phone or you have it on your desktop, or maybe you're old school and you have it printed out like me. Pull it out, look at it, and see which area Sagittarius is. All right, that is the area that's getting reworked. Obviously, when we have a Mercury retrograde coming, you're going to hear all of your astrologers say, well, back up your computers and your iClouds, double check your emails, confirm appointments early, triple check your schedules, don't book travel, expect some delays, right? Watch for potential communication breakdown. Yes, that's very possible and likely. We generally see that during a Mercury retrograde. But this one has been particularly hairy in the pre-shadow, and I feel like we can handle it because we've been dealing with it really for the better part of the last month and a half. Mercury's, essentially Mercury is in Sagittarius this year from October 29th until January the 4th. So that's a really long time to have Mercury in Sag. Obviously, it's in fall because it's in the opposite sign of its association or its domicile, which is Gemini, which is kind of more like information and data, versus Sagittarius, which is, like I said, big picture, big ideas, where we're going, what we're doing. And it's also all about its beliefs. Anyway, Sagittarius is a time, like when we see Mercury go retrograde in Sagittarius, some of the themes, right, are because Mercury is connected to communication, this can manifest a desire for truth and adventure and exploration and how we communicate. But the retrograde effect does create miscommunications, especially in more philosophical or moral discussions. We can see more debates going on revolving around ninth house topics, education, higher mind, college, that kind of stuff. We can also see delays and mix-ups in travel plans, especially long distance or international travel. So guys, if you know that you're going to travel internationally, make copies of passports, have 2 forms of ID, put luggage, bags on your bags, really think long and hard about your travel plans, double and triple check all of your accommodations, that kind of stuff. That's what you're going to want to do. And also for those of you guys who are traveling internationally, I really recommend having translating devices. I think this can be really helpful during this time because there can be some issues with communicating, and also have some backup maps or forms or ways of getting around. I would also say that, many of us are going to find throughout the next 3 weeks, there's a need to kind of revise a plan. It can be something that we're planning to do. It can be something revolving also around our belief systems or education. So if you're wanting to take a course, if you're planning to travel to visit a college, if you're wanting to go back to school, all of these things can have a little bit of a delay. And, Sagittarius is also about expanding horizons. So there can also be the sense of reevaluating your beliefs, your ideologies, maybe even something that you've studied. You might be going back and trying to get transcripts, or maybe you're deciding that you want to reconnect with, an alumni of some kind. Maybe you want to reconnect with a counselor or a professor. That can kind of be coming up. And obviously retrogrades are introspective. So you might be more introspective regarding your spiritual beliefs or your philosophy. Now this gets a little bit wild because it opposes Jupiter in Gemini. So we see this opposition, and this is the mutual reception here. So anytime we see hard aspects to Gemini, it's more information or information overload, or there can be a sense, especially with Jupiter and Gemini, of just feeling lots of communication and things feeling very big. And so I think that the opposition is really, it comes down to expansion versus detail, right? Because, Gemini can be more about curiosity, communication, duality, and Sagittarius is the bigger picture. So this opposition, it's highlighting the tension between wanting to expand knowledge versus understanding for deeper meaning. So there can be a tendency to be overly optimistic, right? We definitely see a lot of exaggeration in communications or plans, leading to potential misunderstandings or overcommitments. and also learning from teaching others might be emphasized. I think that's positive, but it challenges how the information is exchanged or understood. Information overload, I think, is probably the best title I could put on this. With Mercury in its detriment in Sag, facing an opposition to Jupiter, that's also, in its opposite sign. So there can be like this clash between broad ideas and the need for practical applications or deeper understanding, right? Mercury and Sagittarius. Now we take it a step further, and technically throughout the retrograde, Mercury is squaring Saturn. We'll see it 3 times. Jupiter is now coming back into its end of December square with Saturn. So this is a mutable T-square, okay? Unless you're watching it here on Sunday, the moon is hanging out in Virgo, so you're getting a little taste of some of this mutable chaos, which is great. I'll talk about that in a second. But Saturn is the focal point. It's kind of like stealing the show, and now Saturn is direct. So, positive is that we've got squares to Saturn, kind of happening from the right-hand side. So it basically means that Sagittarius is bringing up the truth, exposing things, teaching us things, talking about kind of coming together and, having this global conversation when it comes to responsibility, when it comes to peace, when it comes to really showing up in like leadership. Like Saturn in Pisces is not just about this absent kind of leadership. It's not just about an emperor has no clothes. It's not just about this, kind of distorted and kind of isolated, sad dystopian future. It can also be about leaders who are patient and practical and peaceful. And I think it can be a positive thing. So hopefully this is more of the narrative that we're seeing throughout Sagittarius season, that we want more peace, we want more negotiations, we want more tolerance kind of happening in the world. Because I think that that's really ultimately what this season is kind of all about. Obviously, whenever we see squares to Saturn, there's a reality check here. So, Mercury coming into a square with Saturn, it does have this feeling of like, a sobering reality to the idealism that Mercury and Sagittarius has, or over enthusiasm as Mercury has been in opposition to Jupiter. We also see delays or frustrations in, implementing philosophical ideas into practical reality. Definitely, we're going to see over the next couple weeks lessons in patience and lessons in structure and discipline in spiritual or creative endeavors. Saturn in Pisces is about an emotional and spiritual growth, right? But it's bringing this need to ground our spiritual or creative pursuits in making time for internal reflection or emotional maturity. So I see this square kind of like manifesting as a struggle between freedom, right, Sagittarius, and also restriction, Saturn, between imagination and, practicality. I do think that one of the other themes is going to be about boundaries and communication. Like there could be issues around, setting or respecting boundaries in communication or learning, where Saturn might, make it feel like progress is slow or ideas are confined. But we continue to have these negotiations anyway. We continue to kind of be patient and work through this anyway. So it's really unique in terms of some of the aspects that it's going to be making. I really feel like a lot of people are going to be finding themselves kind of caught between the desire to like expand their minds and the necessity to apply practical wisdom, or you'll face limitations. And so it's a time where like our communication style, our beliefs and plans, they might be tested for integrity or feasibility. And the kind of overarching theme here is about finding the balance between expansion and contraction, between idealism and reality, and ensuring that, our words and our ideas are not only heard, but also understood and effectively materialized into the real world. Ultimately, this period is really pushing us, I think, for personal growth. And during a retrograde, we're kind of reassessing, reorienting our philosophical outlook in the sign of Sagittarius. And we're doing this even though there are obstacles that are being presented with Saturn. And those obstacles, they come with a purpose. They're urging us to find, a deeper meaning. They're urging us to take time to kind of be more introspective and more humble in our approach to how, we kind of have like this quest for truth and wisdom. Saturn can be very humbling to Sagittarius here. So it's kind of like getting us off of our soapboxes or teaching us not to preach, like teaching us to teach in a very kind of patient, calm, respectful, peaceful manner, right? And so it can really kind of bring the ego out of like that whole process. Now, if you guys think about it, Like I said, Mercury has been in Sagittarius since the end of October. But if we go back, I just want to show you guys when all of these this pre kind of shadow stuff started. And it started getting kicked up around November the 12th. So you're going to want to think about what's been happening since November the 12th. It's been about, almost 2 weeks? On the 12th, this is when we first saw Mercury come into a square with Saturn, and Saturn was retrograde. So it hadn't woken up yet, and the square was at a 12. So we were trying to find the answers. We were trying to communicate. We were trying to gain clarity. And there was some kind of setback, right, in how we communicate or get the point across or learn or, maybe sign a contract, travel. There was some kind of mental fog maybe, or some kind of misunderstanding that kind of took place. So I want you to think about this, because this is going to be the first of what will ultimately be 3 squares between Mercury and Saturn. Now, a couple days later, on the 17th of November, we then saw Mercury oppose Jupiter. And this happened with the moon. So if you guys remember, this was this last week, where the moon Jupiter was very chatty, communicative, big news, media, And Mercury opposed this, all right? So this is where it makes communication seem bigger. And I talked about how 18 degrees really connected and correlated a lot to information, news, media, right? Obviously Gemini things, but also job numbers, job reports, things revolving around information, data, analysis, health, right? And this has been such a big topic over the last couple of weeks, obviously, we're hearing lots of news headlines and things revolving around pharmaceutical companies and stocks and the future of that, and changes in the world that's going on, and how we're kind of approaching education and health and wellness and information that's kind of getting out, people talking about it more. So it did manifest. Perhaps this was a day where there was just some really big, exciting or unexpected news that was kind of coming up. Still an aspect to Saturn, but it's not the exact square. It's a little wide for that. And so you want to think back to what was happening here, because this was also the first of what will be 3 Mercury Jupiter oppositions. And then this is kind of leading us into this next week, where we're going to see on the 25th that Mercury will turn retrograde. And when it turns retrograde, it's going to be at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. Okay, so it's going to be in the PM hours. 22 is always a Capricorn degree, so it's older, elders, government, things revolving around leadership, responsibility, long-term goals, that kind of stuff. So maybe we're reviewing, what we have thought about these kind of groups for so long. And this is when the retrograde is actually, beginning. And Mercury will be retrograde from November 25th through December the 15th. Okay, so roughly about 3 weeks. Now this is the first day of the retrograde. So now it's going to go back. We're going to see some of these other aspects happen again. So this is now going to take us to the 4th. And on the 4th is when you're going to see the 2nd Mercury opposed Jupiter. It looks like it's at 16 degrees. So it's very similar to kind of what was happening around the 17th of November. Big ideas, big information, big news. I think a lot of it's going to be about news revolving around media. Gemini is newspaper, print, but it's news stations, radio networks, and information or law or legality lawsuits, revolving this stuff. And it can be about information and truth, right? Mercury in Sagittarius is potentially about people being held accountable or getting ready to be held accountable for some of the news narratives. Certainly we're hearing things about larger, news giants, like MSNBC and stuff, potentially having massive layoffs, talking about whether or not they're going to be selling, to private individuals. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I saw coming. But also lots of news revolving around court cases. So I think we're going to hear more. It's been happening this week, but we've been hearing more about some pretty significant court cases. Some of them are COVID settlements. Some of them are pertaining to, President Trump and his cases that are being dismissed. We're hearing stuff revolving around, major news stations and stuff that are kind of either potentially, like I said, going under, or some that we're going to close down, another not. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it is already kind of happening within this cycle. So I think we're going to see some of the storylines kind of continue with this stuff. All right, so then we're going to see on the 5th, there's going to be the Cazimi here. Okay, so that's 14 degrees of Sagittarius. So the Cazimi is the superior conjunction, Mercury pulling ahead of the sun. So this is like the halfway point through the Mercury retrograde. So if you're like, I don't know what's going on, what's the point of the retrograde? You know, this is the part where you're like, oh, okay. Like now I'm realizing like what needed to change or what conversation I had to have, or, you know, I found the solution, or like the missing item, you know, and it's about some kind of information being relayed. And so what's interesting is that this happens at 14 degrees. So it is about money. Okay. This is a banking degree. Taurus is about food, money, earth, banking, growth. It can be about resources, that kind of stuff. Wallets, so information pertaining to wallets. That also kind of comes up with Taurus. Let's see if I'm missing anything here. Nature, things that we grow, possessions, estates, villages, farmers, money. Okay, so there might be some news regarding these topics. Obviously, this is all ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter's in opposition, so it's still big news, big information. This is also after the new moon in Sagittarius. If you guys are watching this on Sunday, we haven't had the new moon yet, but I talk about how Mercury is going to go retrograde over that new moon spot, so it's almost like we're waiting for information to come in before we kind of reassess our intentions. But this might be like the epiphany day, the aha day, where we have some kind of like awareness of something. And like I said, this is halfway through the Mercury retrograde. Then we're going to get to December 6th, where we're going to see the second of 3 Mercury square Saturn. So this is very similar to what we saw on November 12th, where there was some kind of delay in communication breakdown. Except this time, Saturn's direct. So it's at full steam ahead. It's got the full capabilities now of taking responsibility, or there being, you know, some kind of flushing or kind of clearing or ending something for good. And now Mercury is retrograde. So they can't quite get their acts right. You know, it won't really be until later at the end of December that we'll see them square, and they'll both be direct. So it almost looks like we're still waiting for information to unfold, or from some story to kind of come out, or I'm anticipating throughout this cycle there's going to be a very, very big court decision. And I have said this for a very long time, but I think there's going to be something that's very big that we aren't either seeing coming, or we're not expecting, or there's going to be some big plot twist, or there's going to be some kind of announcement that kind of comes out of some, you know, major high-level court. Very likely. That is still getting worked out, and it's almost like the details still can't quite come out at the beginning of December. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting. But this will be another kind of communication delay, kind of shortage, block type of day. And then this will take us to the 15th, where then Mercury is direct. So yes, Mercury retrograde is over on the 15th. So if you're a stickler, you know, you really could just say, hey, November 25th, you know, through the 15th, these are kind of the times that you don't want to do some of the contracts, traveling agreements, business launches, that kind of stuff. But remember, on the back end, we're still going to see another Mercury square Saturn, Mercury opposed Jupiter, and then eventually a Mercury square Neptune. So I would frankly be waiting until Mercury's in Capricorn. You know, I'd be waiting until, you know, Mercury is coming into a sextile with Saturn, maybe when it's in Capricorn, or a trine with Uranus, before I really want to kind of lay some cement down and commit to some ideas pretty seriously. But that's just me. So Mercury is going to be direct. It'll be direct at 6 degrees, all right, which is a degree that deals with Virgo. So this is about jobs. Big news here in the United States. You know, lots of talk about this like reworking of, you know, the government and government jobs and government spending and things revolving around resources and information and knowledge kind of getting out about how much waste is happening here in the United States. And so I think a lot of it's connected to that. If the Cazimi's at a money degree, if it goes direct, conjunct Mercury. But I also think that a lot of it is about negotiations, negotiations with foreigners, foreign allies, foreign leadership, right? Trying to kind of like work together and kind of bridging the gaps in cultural differences, literal language differences. I think that's part of this as well. So the retrograde's over on the 15th. we see then on the 26th, right after Christmas, this is an interesting day, right here. We're going to see Mercury oppose Jupiter. So this is the third one. So we saw it on November 17th. We saw it on December 4th. And now we're going to see it on December 26th. Mercury's direct, Saturn's direct. They oppose and square. Okay, so the 26th and the 27th is like, whoa, this news does come out finally. You know, that was kind of redacted or held back or secretive, or, you know, we didn't have all the facts or the figures, and now it's kind of like pushing through. And it looks like it might be some rather big news. We've also got the very next day on the 27th, then Mercury squares Saturn. So it opposes Jupiter, big news, squares Saturn. So not every news outlet, not every newspaper, major magazine is going to be talking about or promoting or discussing some of the big news that's coming out. Likely it's going to be something that's like more on international platforms. It might be international news networks, international journalists, independent journalists, but also social media. You're gonna be seeing this coming from social media, but not legacy media, as Saturn kind of represents like the older kind of structures and things in regards to that. All right, so let's keep going here. So keep in mind that right around like the 24th, 25th, 26th, something happening in the background also is that this is the second Jupiter-Saturn square, which, if you guys remember, in August kind of squashed the positivity and the optimism or the outlook, certainly kind of shook the markets a little bit. So, you know, I'm kind of feeling like there's some stuff going on either financially or economically in December that, you know, people are kind of saying, well, it's not that bad, or don't worry, you know, it's not going to be that bad. And they're kind of trying to like smooth things over, right? Those of you guys who are kind of like financially savvy, you know that like usually like the latter part of December, you see like the Santa Claus rally. This makes me wonder, with the Jupiter-Saturn square and the opposition, if we're actually going to see the rally that we're used to seeing. You know, I don't know. It did not go so well in August, so we'll have to see what happens now, but there definitely could be some delays and some setbacks. It could also mean that it's not so much economically, but this is negatively impacting media. It's negatively impacting travel companies, travel stocks, pharmaceutical stocks, that kind of stuff. All right, so then we're going to see, let's see, what am I at here? So that was the third Mercury opposed Jupiter, the third Mercury square Saturn, and then we are going to see Mercury leave shadow on the 3rd of January. So once Mercury gets out of that 22-ish degrees, we're good. So even though, you know, the Mercury retrograde is over at this point, the shadow is over, you know, in the background, Mercury is still heading towards a square with Neptune, which is going to be at a Gemini degree. So there's going to still be like lots of like misunderstandings, haziness, not quite getting the big picture. We're not quite seeing everything so clearly. So take that for what it's worth, because that's going to be kind of going until it goes into Capricorn. And I feel like you're going to see a lot better aspects right around the time that Mercury is sextiling Saturn. So this is going to be like mid-January, or when Mercury is starting to come into that's a good day actually. Mercury sextile Saturn, trine the moon. And when Mercury trines Uranus. And P.S. in January, South Node's now in Virgo, so Mercury transits are going to be a lot more important, as are Jupiter transits. They're both going to be important. So, you know, if you guys are like redoing a website, if you're renegotiating something, if you're waiting to buy a car, if you're doing all that stuff, you guys can still be in the process of doing that during the Mercury retrograde. And also, I'm not going to tell you not to buy a car. I think probably, you know, the second half of December, you know, is probably going to be the best time all year to buy a vehicle. So you're out of Mercury retrograde. Things are definitely getting better. Use your negotiating skills the best that you can. But still, you know, those of you guys who are like doing business and commitments and things like that, you know, you can work on it. I would just say things are going to feel a little bit more solid in January. Okay. As always, I'll put the dates in the description below. You guys will see that. So if you want something to kind of reference, I also did a Mercury retro. I guess I did a Mercury enter Sag video. So I'm not sure which week it was, but I did do that. And I did talk about kind of the themes revolving around this retrograde, but it's a lot of what I just told you. So hopefully that's kind of helpful for you guys. All right, so with that being said, we can get on with the week now that I've kind of touched on the Mercury retrograde. We're going to start with Sunday, the 24th of November. So happy Sunday to my Sunday crew. I hope you guys are well. You are waking up with the moon in Virgo. So obviously, like I said, with the moon being in this particular sign today, let's go to the morning. You guys are feeling that mutable square in a very big way. Moon's in Virgo. I like to clean baseboards, take care of the dog, wash the dog, water the plants, run around the house, get things organized, that kind of stuff. Because Virgo, it needs something to work on. It needs something to perfect. So usually when the moon is in this sign, we're focusing on health and getting things in order and feeling productive and kind of preparing for the week ahead. When the moon's in Virgo, we're looking at Mercury. So if you look at this, as soon as we wake up, the moon's bouncing off of Jupiter. So we wake up feeling maybe a little overly emotionally stimulated. We might be feeling a little bit more emotionally sensitive. We can be easily distracted, right? Moon's coming out of an opposition with Saturn since last night, where this was already starting. And we were like, okay, we need to get focused. And as the moon goes on today, it's going to come into a square with Mercury, making it difficult to emotionally relate and communicate. And that also gets hyperstimulated because of the Jupiter opposition. So today, pretty much all day, we're kind of in this grand mutable cross involving the moon, Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter. And this is where they're all kind of pulling at each other, It's like, who's going to win? And the moon's the fastest moving planet. So as the moon's going through, it's going to go, well, I wake up and I'm really emotional and I'm kind of hyperstimulated and, I'm trying to be productive and not just kind of like isolate myself and check out. But also in order to do that, I have to communicate and that feels overwhelming. So there's a lot of moving parts basically today. Mutable madness is what I'm going to keep calling it. And we're really feeling like, okay, wow, Mercury at 22, it's getting ready to station. We are like, is this what the next 3 weeks is going to feel like? Is it this constant kind of changing, situation from outside of ourselves? Probably. The positive thing is that the moon is coming into a trine with Uranus. So, change can be good. It can be helpful. What are we changing? Uranus is how we eat, how we spend money, our resources, things revolving around work and productivity. My husband was telling me about what's been going on with Bitcoin over the last week, which I've been following, but he was telling me that there's people on Twitter that are basically driving up to work or going into work and they're quitting because they're that's it, I quit. They've made so much money on cryptocurrency. And I use that reference specifically because, the moon in Virgo, which is about changing situations revolving around health, work, and habits, and the trine to Uranus is this sudden fluctuation and change in resources. And, that moon is also trining Venus. So a lot of people could be like, wow, I've been able to organize my life or things in a way where I finally feel like I can, break free, break out of the system. So we may be seeing some people who are having some real changes in regards to luck, fate, finances, job this week. And for you, it might not be that you won the Bitcoin lottery, but it might mean that, you got a new job or, there's a new system or there's a new schedule that you're working with and something that really allows you to kind of feel more comfortable, more productive and feel more abundant. That moon also trine Venus is lovely. I mean, Venus is in Capricorn. So, love is well, what can you build for me? What can we do together? But it's still super productive, and I think that it can be really a harmonious day, and the best way to kind of get out of the mutable madness is to kind of be grounded, have a routine. When the world gets chaotic, what is your routine, right? Do you still get up at the same time? Are you still going for your walks? Are you making sure you're making time to, hang out in the garden or have lunch with your friends once a week? Self-care is very much going to be about this Virgo moon trine Uranus and Taurus and adapting and trying to kind of better support the nervous system. So work with Earth if you can on Sunday. This is going to take us into Monday, which is going to be the 25th. And when we wake up in the morning, all right, so it looks like overnight we're going to pick up the moon in opposition to Neptune, which is a little sensitive, emotional, hard to relate. And then when we wake up in the morning on Monday the 25th, the moon is in Libra. So it's a different vibe. This is much more about relationship, partnership, diplomacy, connecting with others. Right off the bat, that moon's going to trine Pluto. So it's kind of saying where actions in relationships is, very transformative, radical shifts, change is coming. Moon's applying to a conjunction with the South Node, where we can have some moods come up on Monday. We can be a little moody. There can be a sense of like reflecting on relationships and what's changing and whether or not we feel like we have support from other people. We can be releasing and letting go of relationships. We can be doing some emotional clearing revolving around our relationship responsibilities. People kind of coming and going. That can be the vibe. And we're looking at Venus, and Venus is not really doing anything right now. She is starting to kind of come into an inconjunct or quincunx with Jupiter, which might feel like there's like trying to like reconcile. That's like, okay, do I just, stick through it, do the work in the relationships or at work or, with finances and, not try to be too overly optimistic or communicative? Do I just kind of grin and bear it and work through things? Or do I say, no, it might make things uncomfortable, but I need to kind of communicate more of what I need in the long term? I think that with the moon being in, Libra, I'm looking at like the sextile to the sun. So this is like the last nice aspect we're going to see before we come into what will eventually later in the week be the new moon in Sag. This tells me that there's clearing in relationships in order for us to learn lessons and kind of figure out, how we're going to get to where we need to go. We also see later in the day, this is when Mercury turns retrograde. So usually the day of the retrograde, we see some of the retrograde effects. I've talked about this for a while. I mean, Mercury retrograde literally squares Saturn, which can be about a breakdown in communications. And Saturn's in Pisces, so it can be about water. And I talked a lot about undersea cables and communications. We recently saw this the last week or two. I think it was over by the Baltic Sea. And they're talking about like cables being cut. Mercury's also kind of in a square to Neptune. So it's like we're not going to get a lot of clarity or honesty. There's like a lot of like misunderstandings or intentional, false information or manipulation, that's going to come up with some stories. But I have been following the story because I think that there is going to be some major either communication breakdown that's going to happen between two countries. And it can be about like, those lines, which is not just the internet, but it can also be about, telephone communications. I also think that this could be about some major story revolving around a missing plane, a plane going missing, a plane crash, something because of weather or something over water. So something may happen along those lines, obviously touch wood, but it's kind of the feeling that I'm getting with that square. Now Mercury will turn retrograde at 22 degrees. And we are going to just quickly, let me grab my book. We can look at the Sabian symbol for that. And as you guys know, I always round up when I do the Sabian symbols, so I'll be actually reading 23 degrees. There we go. Sagittarius 23. Immigrants entering. The keyword is entrance. Okay, so it's a group of immigrants essentially arriving from overseas. The theme is trying something new. The symbol speaks to the recognition of opportunity and the willingness to risk or leave behind safe and familiar in the hope of finding greater freedom and meaning of life. The image of immigrants entering dramatizes the importance of being able to let go and detach from any situation that offers no further potential for growth or creative expression and reestablish oneself in friendlier surroundings. On a practical level, it symbolizes new beginnings and experience in unfamiliar territory. The suggestion here is a trial and error period of learning and orientation is just around the corner. It does represent adaptability and courage to start over in any present situation that proves unprofitable or unworkable. Watch for giving up too easy and grass is greener on the other side type of philosophy. So the accent is on closing the door to the past and opening wide a gateway to the future. You may sense it's time to pull up roots and make a change. Your greatest advantage lies in finding an environment that has the greatest support for you and your potential, and be willing to endure some hardships while reestablishing yourself. Stepping stones is influx, pioneering, foreigners, strangers, arrival, reestablishment, resettlement, uprooting, reorientation. Wow. Well, you guys know I've said sometimes these are quite literal. It's kind of hard for me to read that and be like, well, huge theme internationally. It's not just here in the United States. Internationally, it's about reworking and rethinking immigration policies, asylum policies, border protection. That we're seeing this in a lot of countries right now, and whether or not this has been something that's been working. Okay, like I've been seeing stuff in the news where it's like people that we've seen on some news that are saying that, you know, you've got people who are actually coming through the southern border that are now turning around and leaving, and they're like, or they're vacating some cities. And you're seeing other news that are saying, well, people are coming in and they're trying to kind of get in before there's a change in administration. I'm sure both could actually probably be correct. They seem like legitimate sources, in my opinion. But, you know, I think about like this symbol, and it's really about like starting a new journey. And it's like going somewhere that's unfamiliar and the challenges and opportunities that can come. Yeah, the topic of like cultural integration. And I think with Mercury retrograde, we're kind of reworking that and like what has and has not worked, and are there some places where like, you know, that can be good, and are there some places that's like, no, it's like actually really created some chaos for certain communities. The opposition to Jupiter is that some cities and communities are completely unrecognizable. They're being flooded with like foreigners and people who not only don't speak the same language, but also, you know, aren't aware of, you know, US kind of customs, lots of like cultural differences, lots of religious differences. And that's not a problem, but it can be a problem in certain spaces where you have certain groups that don't get along. You know what I'm saying? And like that influence that it has also on like the community kind of dynamic. I think that, you know, immigrants in general, they symbolize hope and aspiration for a better life and the willingness to kind of embrace change, you know, for the sake of future prospects. And I think that this symbol can be saying, well, we're all reevaluating and rethinking, like, you know, like where are we going? Like, but also in order to figure out where we're going, where did we come from? And so the topic of like, you know, acceptance and diversity, I think is going to come up. You know, it's about themes of acceptance and inclusivity and, you know, broadening our perspective through a different way of life, but also like where we don't have structure, right? The squares to Saturn, where we don't have limits, we don't have borders, we don't have authority figures like looking out for this, that it's actually caused a little bit of like some challenge and some issues. And so now we're having to kind of rework that. This can also represent like a journey's end, you know, so those who have been on a long journey, literal or metaphorical, this symbol, you know, can indicate like reaching a new phase or a destination after a period of travel or change. So that could be coming up for you as well. All right, so this is now going to take us into Tuesday the 26th. And when we wake up on Tuesday, that moon is still in Libra. While it's been in Libra, Venus has been hanging out in Capricorn. Nothing's kind of really going on there. You will see the moon come into a square with Venus, though, in an opposition with Chiron. So there is some potential on Tuesday for some kind of conflict, some wounding issues in relationships. That is definitely a theme. We will also see the moon trine Jupiter. So the positive is that, you know, working together, harmonizing, relating to other people, partnering, we can open the door to better communication, connection, and learning. But where things get kind of sticky is when the moon comes into a square with Venus, and there's like this sense of not really knowing how to assess, you know, what we need in relationships and how we're feeling, and there's something at odds between relationships and goals, long-term responsibilities, work, right? That kind of stuff, Capricorn things. And then that moon is starting to come into an opposition with Chiron. So it's kind of making Venus the focal point between, okay, wounds, self-healing, self-integration, relationships, and other people. And I feel like this is like, you know, I experienced like Venus square the nodes. I thought that was pretty gnarly, actually, like the last week or two. It was like this like coldness. I think I talked about it last week, but it was like this coldness of some people just being like, we just like work through it, you know? We don't deal with the problems, we just work through it. And so this can be like, well, there's like some relationship changes or emotional things coming up with relationships, but then once again, like, are we just working through it? And if we're working through it, you know, is it causing more conflict? Is it causing more wounding? That can be the case. You're starting to feel Venus come into a square with Chiron too, so that's kind of hanging around for a couple days. I looked at the 26th a couple times, and something that I didn't see until I was just finishing my notes on this is I noticed that the moon and Mercury are in a sextile. Okay, so where we harmonize, relate with other people, rethink, rework something about communication, both the moon and also Mercury are going to form a yod to Uranus. This will be later in the day, going into early morning on the 27th, but that sextile pointing at Uranus. So it's like, where can we work as a team and like learn how to rework or rethink something about our beliefs or what we've learned when it comes to values, Taurus, changes in money, the financial system, resources, the planet. So I think we're going to hear a lot more about like what's going on kind of globally with the economy. There's been a lot of talk about like this split where you've got like the BRICS nations and then you've got like, the dollar that's just kind of like out there in the wind. And, possibly like where, working together in kind of like partnership can actually kind of help solve some kind of global financial concerns or crisis, I'm hoping. But it looks like there's going to be something that might kind of come up regarding that, maybe Tuesday going into Wednesday. Something else that you're going to see, let me go back actually just a little bit here so we stay on the 26th. There you go. When we go back, you're also going to see that this is a day that's kind of got legs. Like, the day starts with like the sun in a trine to the north node, which is basically if we're focusing on the bigger picture, adventure, learning, expansion, we can really kind of tap into, our destiny, the direction of where we're going for independence and being more self-sufficient, right? North node in Aries. And then on the other side, the sun is actually also in a trine with Mars. So the 26th has like some really get up and go energy. This is a really cool fire trine that you're going to see here. And the sun trine Mars and also trine Mars in Leo and also the north node in Aries. I mean, this is like, like something's being activated basically. The north node is kind of helping us when it comes to our direction. Mars is about drive. The sun is about the higher meaning, the bigger purpose. Like, I feel like there's a lot of like feeling motivated on Tuesday. I feel like this is also a time where, we can see things like really get up and go. There can be a lot of action kind of happening because the fire signs are definitely about action, life, creativity, being bold, drama. All right, so then this is going to take us into the 27th, where when we wake up, that moon is still in Libra. It is now out of the opposition with Chiron. It is now coming into and in conjunct with Uranus and Taurus. So we've got another little bit of a yod here between Neptune, Uranus, and the moon. So that can be bringing up, I guess relationships or people outside of ourselves, helping us when it comes to our resources and our finances and also seeing our blind spots. This can be partners, friends, clients. This can be therapists, somebody who's, kind of pointing something out to you that can give you some kind of clarity that can be helpful. Throughout the day, actually, we're going to see, especially in the morning, that moon's still in a sextile to Mercury. So it's still opening the door to better communication. Then it looks like the moon is going to move into Scorpio. That's going to happen in the PM hours. And it'll immediately come into square with Pluto. Okay, so you'll feel the vibe shift on Wednesday night. This to me feels like it gets a little bit moody, a little intense, kind of dark, passionate. And the moon going through Scorpio, squaring Pluto is like we're emotionally responding to major changes, transformations within the collective. Now, something else you're going to see on Wednesday night is Venus now at a 19 is squaring Chiron at a 19. So Wednesday night, there can be some, some issues revolving around maybe like, Venus in Capricorn is like our long-term goals and responsibilities, our career endeavors, our relationship with people professionally, and, kind of feeling like the odd man out or slighted or, that we're not getting the recognition that we deserve or feeling rejected, feeling wounded in some way, right? Chiron themes. It's interesting that, Venus square Chiron, it can bring up wounding, and then the moon square Pluto is like kind of like, kind of really feeling it in the heart space if there is some kind of major emotional shift or like relationship or friendship change. Like we can take it pretty hard basically with that square. So be mindful that there is some moodiness on Wednesday night between those two particular aspects. And this is going to lead into Thursday, the 28th. And when we wake up, that moon is still in Scorpio. So we're always looking at Pluto. We're also looking at Mars, which, by the way, Mars is like crawling. It's very slow. And on Thursday morning, you're going to see the moon square Mars after coming out of a square with Pluto. So
The moon is kind of the focal point of a T-square between Mars and Pluto. And this is about how we are emotionally responding to change, crisis, endings, new beginnings, some kind of transformation. This can be, Mars in opposition to Pluto. I mean, you're going to feel that too now with Moon in Scorpio. But whenever you've got like a Moon square Pluto, there can be some like emotional manipulation, darker moods, seeing through things, kind of people's real true intentions, and responding to threats and things kind of going on pretty intensely. And then the Moon square Mars is also about feeling emotionally challenged or sometimes like under pressure, or people being kind of emotionally combative, right? So Thursday morning is quite intense. This is like very stay out of the kitchen vibes. If you're celebrating, Thanksgiving, you probably don't want to be the first one, to grandma's house or like mom's house. Taking your time whenever you're getting to where you need to go, not rushing, trying to be somewhere. Be very careful with like hot water, sharp knives, annoying, agitating little siblings or, family members that are around hot or like sharp objects. Stay out of the kitchen, basically. Things are a little intense on Thursday, and just take your time, if you're kind of getting somewhere. With that Moon in Scorpio, we're feeling very strongly now the Mars-Pluto opposition, which we kind of had the beginning of November. It's chilled out a little bit, but it's still within 5 degrees. And so it's going to kind of hang around that 5-6 degree opposition to Pluto, between now and the beginning of the year. So Mars basically wants to fight. It's young and hot and scrappy. And it's very kind of ego-driven in Leo. It's passionate about what it believes in, what it loves. It wants to show off a little bit. And the opposition of Pluto in Aquarius is very much the collective fears, kind of collective terror, trauma, psychological issues, and the impact and the influence that is having on individuals or on younger people, right, Leo? So the moon's going to square this. And I feel like there can be some drama revolving around some people's perspectives about like, kind of like where we're going in the world. And I would say Mars in Leo really wants to kind of lead with like, I want to be a leader. I want to create change. I want to be inspired. I want to also focus on growth in life and passion and creativity, versus Pluto and Aquarius, which to me feels a little sterile. It feels like a little, it's like dystopian. It's kind of like, well, like a lot of people kind of have this perspective that's like, well, the world is like fucked, And Mars in Leo doesn't agree with that. Mars in Leo is like, I won't go down without a fight, which is why you're seeing such a division right now, I think, in the world with a lot of people's perspectives, where people are kind of like very optimistic about the future, and they're getting kind of ramped up and they're excited. And then you have some people that are just kind of like, oh, things are going to be terrible. So there's lots of polarity with oppositions. There's lots of division with oppositions. And obviously you guys know, that we're getting into kind of like holiday time. So whether you're going to like Thanksgiving, or, you're getting ready for your religious holidays with family, or maybe you're just spending more time around family, the next couple of months is going to be quite intense when it comes to people's political views. And I think of like Saturn and the connection with Aquarius in like the old ways. Obviously Uranus is the new age ruler, but this can be about like, elders versus like younger people, or like the old ways of doing things versus like, the younger kind of politicians and people moving in. So politics are a very hot topic with the transits. It has nothing to do with what's going on in the world. It's just, might be just a time to be mindful that not everybody's going to share your same perspective, and like there could be some combativeness kind of in the skies. So don't fan the flames. All right, we're going to see the moon continue to go through Scorpio all day on Thursday. So I'm pretty sure this is Thanksgiving. Yeah. And the moon isn't really doing anything. Like, it comes out of the square with Pluto and Mars later in the day. We are going to be experiencing a dark moon. So this is the moon going through the sign before we come into the new moon. And like this transit, people are notoriously grouchy. Okay, like that's what happens. And the moon in Scorpio, people can also be like a little pissy, but people are grouchy when we have this aspect, because things are kind of closing out. They're clearing out, right? We're getting ready to go into like that new moon phase where things become a little bit more like peaceful and calm. And the moon is also coming into a trine with Saturn. So I feel like I can see a lot of people being like, I can only take so much of my family, that we're not doing like the all day thing. We'll come in, we'll spend time for a few hours in the afternoon. We, do dinner, and then it's like, well, why would we just like lay around and sleep? Like we might as well go home. Moon trine Saturn is like, I want to go home and be in my space. I want to have some privacy. Like I need some time to like reflect. And so, you might do something a little bit different this year, maybe with that aspect. It could also mean that you're just preferring to have like a lower maintenance holiday with the moon trine Saturn. Things are a little bit maybe different for some people this year. Scorpio is a sign that's about finances and financial, situations. So for some people, they might feel like they're not capable of hosting or having a big party or, bringing a bunch of people around, and they're kind of like trying to keep things a little bit like more small and also affordable. Conservative is like the term that I would use with like the moon trine Saturn. That's kind of happening in the PM hours, but certainly moon trine Saturn, especially Saturn and Pisces, I can see a lot of people like sleeping or opting to sleep because they're like, I want to avoid like the family drama. So that could definitely be a thing here. All right, so then the moon is going to continue doing its thing. It comes through that trine with Saturn in the evening hours. It's going to keep moving. Nothing else is really kind of happening here. That's going to take us basically into what will then be Friday the 29th. And when we wake up on the 29th, the moon is still in Scorpio. It's now starting to come into a sextile with Venus. So it's able to kind of, focus on love, values, commitment. Venus certainly in Capricorn is about commitment, professional relationships, being very grounded in partnerships. And we are also going to be seeing the moon come into an opposition with Uranus. So obviously moon in Scorpio on Thanksgiving, and then the day after Thanksgiving, which a lot of people know is like Black Friday. Wow. I'm curious to see like some of the numbers and the turnout is. I feel like I'm like a little bit like over like the appeal of Black Friday personally. I feel like I come from a generation of people who literally would, our family would go and they would have dinner, they would do their thing, and then if you really, really wanted that big screen TV, best believe you were going to be out there Thanksgiving night in the cold waiting to hopefully get in and then fight somebody like bum fight style to be able to get your TV. We don't do that anymore, and I don't think we should. I think it's just it's a disgusting display of just American greed. But now it's like you see companies and stuff like Amazon and all these people, they pump up all the prices. Then they say, oh, it's 30% off. And then you realize like 2 or 3 months from now that you weren't getting a deal. You still paid more. They just said it was on sale, right? I mean, obviously this is like marketing 101, but I will tell a lot of people with the moon being in Scorpio on Black Friday and the opposition to Uranus, I can tell you, you're not going to get as good of a deal as you think you're going to get. There is like a little bit of like getting bamboozled, I think, with Uranus at 24. I also feel like a lot of people are really going to want to read the fine print if you're doing I'm getting a credit card to be spending, I'm signing up for something because I'm getting a percentage off. Like make sure you read the fine print, you know what the interest rates are going to be. There can be some things that can get you. And some of those flex pays or payments or interests and stuff, I don't know. It may not be a good deal, personally. I wouldn't be buying shit right now anyway with Mercury Retrograde. Mercury Retrograde in Sagittarius in opposition to Jupiter. Like people being like, this thing is amazing. It's the best thing ever. And they're going to sell you on it. You're going to pay more than you should. And then in 3 or 4 weeks, there's going to be a newer version that's going to come out and you're going to be pissed because you bought during the retrograde. So if you're doing your holiday shopping in a Mercury Retrograde like this, where likely, things are going to sound way too good to be true, or you're going to go to buy something and then you're going to find out it's sold out or it was out of stock or they don't have the color or the size that you want, or that there's going to be shipping delays and they're going to say, well, we'll get it to you. Like some of you guys may not get your Christmas gifts for some time because Mercury is retrograde in the sign that deals with importing and exporting, which P.S. everything has to come from overseas and it comes on a boat. And the squares to Pisces are saying there could be international kind of delays with shipping. So I would be either A, buying stuff in America, if you live in America, or B, I would also be probably saving boxes and receipts because there are some things that you're going to return. Like we don't want to buy major gadgets and things or expenses with Mercury retrograde. We just don't. So if you're willing to take your chances, there could be some delays, save your receipts basically. Okay. That's my MO on that. We will see the moon throughout the day, like I said, come into an opposition with Uranus, and then eventually it will trine Neptune. So moon in Scorpio is still a little kind of moody, but that's okay. That's okay. I think most of like the kind of the static comes in the PM hours when it opposes Uranus. And that might be when some people are like, oh my God, I spent so much money, you know, put it all on my credit card. And then it's trining Neptune, which could also be like a numbing things. We're just like kind of numbing the pain. We're overeating, overspending, overindulging, overdrinking, that kind of stuff. So you want to be mindful of that, which we definitely can do during the holidays. I feel like moon in opposition to Uranus, like trine Neptune, like people who have had a couple glasses of wine, they've also probably had way more turkey leftovers than what they need, and they're just like on this like high, and they go and spend a bunch of money, you know, and then they're shocked and surprised to see what they spent. Or you're opening your partner's kind of like, you know, your joint credit card statement, you're like, you spent how much? You know, the shocks that can kind of come on the 29th. Moon trine Neptune is definitely good for intuition, tapping in, divination, dreams, sensitivity, that kind of stuff. So I would be paying attention to what's coming through on Friday night. And then this will take us into the 30th, which is Saturday. There's a lot going on Saturday. Okay, Saturday is a very busy day. We wake up with the moon in Sag. Well, we will see later in the day. This is the new moon in Sag. But if you guys caught my new moon in Sagittarius video, I talk about how this degree at 9 degrees is going to be visited by Mercury Retrograde. So the short version is, with the new moon in Sag, we set intentions revolving around growth and optimism and where we're going and the bigger picture. And, you know, we're really enthusiastic, but it squares Saturn. So there's some stuff we have to think about. We have to make it real. We can't just make it sound great. There needs to be a sense of like having a plan and kind of grounding it out in reality. And Mercury is still going to retrograde over this degree, which means that pretty much all of December, we're reevaluating what our goals are and our intentions are. And we're kind of integrating, you know, more of this Sirius with Saturn. We're trying not to be too kind of blown out of proportion with the opposition with Jupiter, but we're also trying to keep an open mind. So set your intentions, make a list, you know, write it in pencil so you can go back over it and you can like erase stuff and you can edit and change things, and like maybe you're working on it throughout the month until you get to New Year's, and then you have a better idea of like what your intentions are, because it's going to take all month to kind of do that. There's a process very similar to the Mercury retrograde with the squares to Saturn and the oppositions to Jupiter. We see the moon sextile Pluto, which is very empowering. It's about change and kind of working towards the future. And we also start to see Mercury coming into an opposition with Jupiter. Jupiter is the ruler of Sag. So whether the moon's in Sag or it's the new moon in Sag, we have our eyes on Jupiter, and Jupiter is retrograde. So we're reevaluating, rethinking what we've learned, what we have to say, where we're going, what we're learning, what we're reading. And it's also in opposition to Saturn. So it's almost like, for me, you know, Saturn in Pisces has kind of felt like this invisible wall or like this haze or this fog or something I can't quite put my finger on. And I have found that when planets have been squared to Saturn, I'm like something, it almost feels like the other shoe is about to drop. Like something's going to happen, or like something's coming. And it's a feeling, right? Saturn in Pisces is a feeling. It's like that ominous feeling sometimes. That's like, ooh, something's brewing. And so, you know, I kind of think about with this, you know, opposition in the square, that may be kind of coming up for some of us. Maybe we're feeling that, we're taking that into consideration before we're setting any of our intentions. We are also starting to feel the incoming second Jupiter-Saturn square, which, like I said, we saw in August, kind of squashes the faith and the optimism and the hope a little bit. I don't like saying that, but, you know, even though it's not going to happen to the later part of December, whenever the moon's going through Sagittarius or Pisces, we're going to feel that. So you're definitely going to feel that a little bit more with this lunar kind of transit. Now in the late PM hours, this is when we're going to have the new moon. So it looks like the moon is going to be at around 9 degrees of Sag. So it's in a Sagittarius degree. For some of you guys, it's going to be happening on the 30th. Some of you guys, it's going to happen on the 1st. It depends on what time zone you're in. So just know you can do your intention setting or your preparation for your setting, or, you know, creating your intention notes that you're going to work on all month. You can basically do that on Saturday night. Because remember, like I said, this is a new moon with a pause, squares Saturn, because we are going back, Mercury retrograde, and we are reworking before we set something new in action. And that'll be kind of later in December when Mercury's direct. This new moon also trines the North Node. So it's helping us kind of grow and have faith in ourselves. right? North Node in Aries. In our actions, our direction, our path. And it's also in a trine with Mars. So it's action, passion, creativity. So here's that fire trine that's kind of popping back up again. So this is kind of like, well, even though there's some blockages, like, let's get creative. What are we going to do about it? You know, Mars in Leo wants to get creative. Sagittarius wants to believe that anything's possible. Aries says, you know, I just want to get started. So this is really great energy for a new moon. I think it's helpful. And, you know, certainly in 6 months' time, when this becomes a full moon, you guys will see that Jupiter, the ruler, will then be in Cancer. It'll be in its exaltation. Mercury will be conjunct Jupiter. So there's good things definitely on the horizon from this full moon. It'll be square Saturn and Neptune. That's a whole other bag. So certainly we're still feeling the effects of the, you know, do we expand or do we contract? Like we kind of see with this new moon. This is then going to take us to Sunday. Okay, so the moon's going to keep moving. It does look like on the 1st, with that moon in Sag, first thing in the morning, we're seeing the moon square Saturn. Well, I mean, I'm gonna give myself a little bit of credit here. I told you guys last week, I was like, hey, there's gonna be some crazy weather stuff. Holy cow. I saw like that bomb cyclone in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, there was some tornado warnings that was like north of Texas. There was some stuff, man. So I'm seeing some similar things this week, as much as I hate to say that. You know, I think the mutable signs deal with storms. Okay, Saturn is always cold and it's dry and it's icy, although it is in a wet sign, Pisces. Jupiter in Gemini can also be about wind, big winds, right? Big storms. And Sagittarius can also be about that as well. So when you see like a Mercury retrograde in opposition to Jupiter, you know, big news revolving storms, then we see squares happening to Saturn. We could see some delays from storms for sure. We could also see, you know, with Mars, traditionally when Mars is retrograde in a fire sign, we see warm front. I live in central Texas, so it's been kind of weird the last like week or so because there was like a day or two that was like 82, 83 degrees, and then all of a sudden, boom, cold front comes in, drops, you know, 10, 15 degrees. The wind comes through. It was like crazy how quickly the weather is changing. And so when you see some of that stuff, you know, where the heat is changing and also like the wind is kind of coming in, we can see some really serious storms in some parts of the world. So obviously, you know, with the Mercury retrograde going on in Sag, we're going to see a lot of issues with airlines. I hope it's not airplane crashes. I think we might see one. I hope it's going to be more delays, but we might see some really big delays with oppositions to Jupiter square Saturn. But it can also be some international flights. It doesn't necessarily have to be where you live. It could be, you know, outbound of some countries and kind of getting around, or that there are some, you know, cities that are having issues, people getting in, and it can be because of flooding or because of extreme storms. So be mindful that that is definitely hanging around on the 1st. Saturn in Pisces, you know, it's direct now, and I think a lot of this is about order, peace, dissolving conflict, changing narratives, right? Mercury retrograde, all in opposition to Jupiter. So we are walking back ideas, statements, things that we thought we knew. We are also reworking our schedules. We're learning something new. It's been interesting this week to hear about, you know, Trump, who's been apparently trying to run like peace summits out of Florida and Mar-a-Lago, meeting with the head of NATO, meeting with other leaders, including Ukraine and other leaders from around the world, trying to have peace discussions. And so it's interesting to see this like leading up, the Mercury retrograde, reworking and rethinking something about international, you know, conversations, allies, and relationships, even if there are cultural differences or, you know, communication breakdowns or misunderstandings. And then the squares to Saturn is like the need to have responsibility, patience, persistence, peace, and to negotiate, you know, and to dissolve issues. I have been saying for so long, I was like, I can't wait for Sagittarius season, because we're going to start to see that people are going to realize that we have to kind of put our differences aside, that we can't let these beliefs about our culture, religion, gender, identity, whatever, politics get in the way of being able to relate to one another, being able to communicate with one another. We can't let these be reasons why we, you know, kind of cut people out, right? And so this kind of comes up a lot, I think, you know, especially later in the day, we'll see that moon come into conjunction with Mercury at a 19. So this is emotionally, we're wanting to relate, communicate, and connect the bigger meaning, the higher purpose with other people, establish relationships, right? And like learn how to connect, even if we come from different backgrounds, beliefs, or frames of mind. And it's coming out of an opposition to Jupiter. It's coming out of a square with Saturn where it's felt blocked, and it's trining Chiron, helping heal wounds, what we're learning about communication and better relating to other people. So kind of going back to what I said, when we looked at the Sabian symbol this week and we talked about how, you know, that Sabian symbol was like literally about like immigration and, figuring out where we can go from here and like trying to move forward, forging into an area where things can be better, we can relate better, we can understand each other better. That's really what this week is going to be about, turning misconceptions into opportunities, right? And really focusing on bridging gaps in literal, cultural, or spiritual divides. That's what we want to be focusing on. I'm hoping that we're able to do this. I'm hoping that, any issues or misunderstandings that we have, we're able to kind of work through them and put them aside and not allow it to get in the way of making progress for the future. So that's pretty much this next week in a nutshell. I do want to remind you guys that I have that Mercury and Sag video. I also touch on this in my horoscopes for the month of November. I was gone on Thursday, so I appreciate your guys' patience. I have been feeling majorly under the weather, but I'm trying to kind of stay with the program and not kind of leave you guys high and dry during a Mercury retrograde. I will be having the horoscopes for December probably coming out on Tuesday. I'm already kind of working on putting those together for you guys. So I will ask you to kind of review those videos. You can check out and listen to your horoscope to see where the retrograde is kind of be taking place for you guys in your rising sign. I hope that this is helpful in kind of navigating the week ahead. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Leave me a message down below and let me know how you're feeling with the pre-shadow that's already happened. What are some Mercury retrograde things that have been happening for you? How are you navigating these times? And how are you feeling about some of the things that are kind of coming up? It's always fun to see you guys come back and you'll tell me how your week played out, or you'll come back on the day that I'm making some of the predictions and you'll talk about some of the stuff that's going on in the news headlines. I love it. I appreciate it. The engagement is awesome. Anything that you guys do, if you're liking, you're commenting, you're sharing, it helps the channel grow, and we are working our way towards 40,000 subscribers. And I just want to say thank you guys for supporting my work, for being here. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will catch you guys back here on Tuesday. With that being said, enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you very soon. Take care.